What if tomorrow you woke up and the very name that defined your life, your status, your place in the world was gone, stripped away, erased? That's the nightmare that Prince Harry, the once beloved son of Princess Diana and King Charles, is now facing. A man born into a role he never chose, waking up to find that even the last symbolic tie to his past, the title of prince, may no longer belong to him. Can you imagine the weight of that moment? The cameras, the headlines, the whispers, suddenly all of it crystallizing into one devastating truth. Buckingham Palace has spoken, and Harry's very identity is on the line. From the outside, it may sound like just a word, a title, a ceremonial prefix. But inside the gilded walls of the monarchy, titles are more than mere labels. They're currency, they're weapons, they're shields. They decide who matters, who holds power, and who fades into irrelevance. And now, for the first time in living memory, a king has looked at his own son and said, "No more." The monarchy must protect its dignity, and if that means stripping a prince of his crown jewel, the title that has clung to him since birth, then so be it. Imagine the sting of those words. Titles are earned, not inherited by default. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But let's pause here. Why now? Why Harry? Why this unprecedented move? Think about it. Harry has walked away from duties, yes. He's criticized the royal family in interviews, yes. But the palace has tolerated scandal before. It has endured crisis after crisis. So why is this the line that can't be crossed? What happened behind closed doors to push King Charles into a corner where the only solution was to publicly cut off his son's princely identity? Doesn't it make you wonder what was brewing beneath the surface? The world has watched Harry transform from the spare into a global figure in his own right. From his mischievous younger days, dressed in questionable costumes, partying under the glare of tabloids, to his role as a soldier in Afghanistan, Harry's life has always swung between scandal and heroism. The title Prince wasn't just an accident of birth. It was a lifeline. It gave him purpose, even when the world was mocking him. It shielded him, even as it defined him. And now, in one cold stroke of the palace pen, that lifeline has been threatened. Here's where it gets even more gripping. The palace didn't just release a bland statement. Oh no, the words were calculated. Every syllable carefully chosen. They spoke of dignity, of tradition, of protecting the institution. Not the family, not the individual, the institution. And isn't that revealing? To the monarchy, even a son, even the child of Diana, is expendable if he threatens the image of the crown. Do you see the contradiction? Family loyalty on one hand, institutional survival on the other. Which wins? Which should win? Now, let's talk emotion. Harry isn't just some distant royal figure. He's a man who lost his mother at 12, in a tragedy that the world consumed like a spectacle. He's a man who has spoken openly about trauma, about struggling in the shadow of royal expectations. And yet, the very system that shaped him is now willing to erase him. How does that hit you? Can you feel the irony? The boy who once walked behind Diana's coffin, mourned by millions, is now the man being symbolically buried by his own father's decision. But this isn't just Harry's story. It's a global drama. The UK tabloids roar with glee. The American media frames it as a Shakespearean clash. Social media splits down the middle, half cheering the monarchy's firmness, half calling it cruelty. And through it all, Harry sits at the center, reportedly in tears. Tears not just of humiliation, but of loss. Because when the palace strips you of a title, they strip you of more than a name. They strip you of your place in history. They strip you of the respect you've carried since the day you were born. And what's left after that? Let's take a step back. The monarchy has weathered crises before. Edward VIII gave up the throne for love. Prince Andrew faced disgrace over scandal. Princess Margaret was denied her chance at happiness for the sake of tradition. But through all of this, the titles remained. Even in shame, the titles endured. That's what makes this moment so explosive. It breaks precedent. It tears through the unwritten rules that even scandal couldn't erase. For the first time, a prince may cease to be a prince in the eyes of the very system that created him. And doesn't that raise the most chilling question of all? If Harry can be stripped, who's next? Could Meghan lose her Duchess title? Could Archie and Lilibet find themselves quietly edited out of royal history? Is this the beginning of a purge designed to protect the crown at any cost? The thought alone is enough to send ripples of unease through anyone who has followed the royal family's saga. But let's not forget the personal layer here. Behind the press releases, behind the formal statements, behind the calculated words, there's a father and a son. A father who has waited decades to be king, now forced to choose between his crown and his child. And a son who has spent his life trying to define himself outside that crown, only to realize that without it, he might vanish entirely. Isn't that the cruelest irony of all? Harry wanted freedom. But freedom, it seems, comes with the ultimate price, losing the one word that anchored him to history, Prince. Now, ask yourself this: is this justice? Or is it revenge? Is Charles protecting the monarchy or punishing his son? The truth may lie somewhere in between. But here's what's undeniable. This move has changed everything. It has redrawn the boundaries of royal power. It has exposed cracks in the monarchy that can't be plastered over with polite smiles and carefully staged balcony appearances. And it has left Harry standing at the edge of an identity crisis unlike any he's faced before. And here's the twist. This isn't the end of the story. Far from it. Because sources whisper that the announcement we've seen is only the beginning. That behind the official statement lies a darker truth, one tied to secret meetings, fierce arguments, and a final straw that no one in the public has yet been told. And when that truth comes out, it won't just shatter Harry's world. It could shake the monarchy itself. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. It began with a line so carefully crafted, so deceptively simple, that most people might have skimmed past it without realizing its explosive weight. But insiders knew. Journalists knew. Royal watchers with years of experience in decoding Buckingham Palace's language gasped. The words were buried in the middle of an official statement, hidden behind polite phrasing and the familiar veil of formality. Going forward, the Duke of Sussex will no longer be addressed in any formal capacity as Prince Harry. Read that again. No longer Prince Harry. The title wasn't removed from the birth records, of course. It wasn't erased from the family tree. But in every speech, in every program, in every official document moving forward, the world would be told, Harry is not a prince. Not anymore. Shocking? Absolutely. Historic? Without question. But here's what makes it even more startling. Buckingham Palace doesn't speak by accident. Every sentence, every comma, every subtle choice of words is weighed and debated by advisors, lawyers, and communications experts before it ever sees the light of day. So when they chose those exact words, they knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't just informing the public. They were sending a message. And the message was crystal clear. The institution comes before family, and no one, not even a son of the king, is untouchable. Now, let's rewind to the moment this statement hit the press. It was early morning in London, a typical day on the surface. But by 9 a.m., royal correspondents were already sounding alarms. Within minutes, TV networks had scrambled to push breaking news banners across the screen. Buckingham Palace announces changes to Prince Harry's title. Twitter lit up. Instagram Reels dissected the wording. And YouTube channels just like this one, were flooded with speculation. Can you picture it? Phones buzzing in kitchens, offices, and cars. Families arguing over breakfast. Was the monarchy being cruel? Or was it finally standing up for itself? In the age of global headlines and instant outrage, the palace had just unleashed a storm that no PR strategy could fully control. And they knew it. But the most devastating impact wasn't felt in the press rooms of London or the boardrooms of news networks. It was felt across the ocean in Montecito, California. Imagine Harry sitting at home when that statement broke. Was it a phone call from an aide? A frantic message from a friend? Or did he see it the same way we all did, on the news ticker with the rest of the world? That question alone keeps royal watchers up at night. What we do know is this. Reports quickly surfaced that Harry was emotional and shaken. Some claimed he broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the sheer finality of it. Others whispered that Meghan was furious, storming around the house in disbelief. But before we dive into Harry's personal reaction, let's pause and look at the wording again. Because hidden in that single line was more than just an announcement. It was a coded rebuke. no longer be addressed in any formal capacity. Do you see it? That's not just about speeches or programs. That's about identity. That's about erasing a brand. For years, Harry has been marketed, invited, and celebrated as Prince Harry. His charities, his events, his appearances, they all carried the weight of that royal prefix. And in one moment, the palace had made it clear they were pulling the plug. Without that title, Harry is just Harry, just another celebrity among thousands in Hollywood. And isn't that exactly what he never wanted to be? The shockwaves traveled quickly. Morning talk shows in America were incredulous. Is this even legal? Some hosts asked. British tabloids wasted no time, with headlines like King Charles Cut Son Adrift and Prince No More. Social media was even more divided. Some celebrated the move as overdue, a necessary step to protect the monarchy's dignity. Others accused Charles of cruelty, of punishing his own child in the harshest way possible. And here's the contradiction that makes this moment so gripping. Just years ago, Harry stood with the monarchy during Invictus Games ceremonies, during tours across the Commonwealth, during national events where his role as Prince Harry wasn't just symbolic, it was powerful. He represented something bigger than himself. Now, the very institution he once stood for had turned its back on him. Can you feel the irony? Let's talk about how the palace staged this announcement. Notice that it wasn't done in a flashy press conference. There was no video, no speech from Charles himself. Instead, they slipped it into a statement, letting the words do the damage. That's a classic palace move, surgical, silent, devastating. It allows them to look dignified while still landing a blow that leaves scars. And that raises the question, why so subtle? Why not make it a grand proclamation? The answer may lie in the fact that even the palace knows how dangerous this decision is. Too much attention, and they risk looking vindictive. Too little, and the message doesn't land. So they struck a careful balance. Quiet words, loud consequences. But don't think for a second that this was a sudden decision. No, this move was years in the making. Every interview Harry gave, every Netflix documentary, every page of spare chipped away at the palace's patience. Insiders say Charles wanted to wait, to give Harry time to redeem himself. But patience wears thin, especially when the survival of the monarchy is at stake. By the time this statement was issued, the decision had already been sealed behind closed doors. The public announcement was simply the final nail in the coffin. Now here's the kicker. People inside the palace leaked that the line about damage to the institution was debated fiercely before being included. Some advisors reportedly wanted to soften the language, to avoid making Harry look like a villain. Others argued that the monarchy had to draw a line in the sand. In the end, Charles sided with the hardliners. He wanted it clear. Harry hadn't just disappointed his family. He had damaged the institution. That distinction is key, because it elevates the issue from private family drama to a matter of state and tradition. And when the monarchy frames something that way, the gloves are off. So where does this leave us? The world is reeling from the announcement, trying to interpret every word, every phrase. Harry, somewhere across the Atlantic, is reportedly devastated. Meghan is allegedly furious. William and Charles are silent. And the media circus is only just beginning. But here's the thing you have to ask yourself. What happens when a man who was born a prince is told he's no longer one? What does that do to his identity, his marriage, his children, his future? That's the question Buckingham Palace has thrown into the world. And the answers are going to be explosive, because Harry's tearful reaction was only the beginning. What happened behind closed doors in Montecito after that statement hit the news was even more shocking than anyone could have imagined. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Picture the scene. The morning sun spilling across the California hills, the quiet hum of birds, the stillness of Montecito, broken in an instant by a phone buzzing with the alert no royal son could ever prepare for. Prince Harry, once the cheeky boy of Kensington Palace, once the soldier on the front lines in Afghanistan, once the beloved people's prince, now faced a headline that ripped through him like a blade. Prince Harry to be officially stripped of prince title. He froze. At first, maybe he thought it was another rumor, another tabloid invention. But then the confirmation came. BBC, Sky News, CNN, all saying the same thing. The statement from Buckingham Palace wasn't gossip. It was fact. The monarchy had spoken, and Harry had been cut off from the very identity that had defined him since birth. And the tears came. Reports from those close to the Sussexes whispered that Harry was visibly emotional, his voice cracking as he tried to process what this meant. Imagine it. The man who had stood tall at his mother's funeral, who had endured endless headlines about his mistakes, who had faced the battlefield, reduced to tears not by war or tragedy, but by the words of his own father, King Charles. How cruelly ironic is that? Now pause for a second. Have you ever been told you're not who you thought you were anymore? That your role, your name, your identity, the thing people recognize you by, has been stripped away? Can you imagine the feeling? That's what Harry was facing. This wasn't just about a title. It was about dignity. It was about respect. And for Harry, it was about betrayal. But the story doesn't end with Harry's tears. Because behind those tears were layers of emotion, anger, confusion, disbelief. Sources say he asked, "Why now? Why me?" Questions the palace refused to answer directly. He wanted to believe there had been a mistake, some miscommunication. But deep down, he knew this was deliberate. This was punishment. And then came Meghan, furious, storming around the house, demanding answers. She reportedly grabbed her phone, calling friends, allies, anyone who could give clarity. But Harry wasn't shouting. He wasn't pacing. He was sinking. He sat in silence, head in hands, tears on his cheeks, staring at the ground as if the weight of centuries had just collapsed onto his shoulders. Think about the contrast here. Meghan raging, Harry breaking. Two different reactions to the same blow. Meghan's fury was fire. Harry's was heartbreak. And doesn't that reveal something deeper about their dynamic? Meghan has always been the fighter, the challenger. Harry, beneath the bravado, has always been the boy who wanted acceptance, who wanted to belong. And now, even that boy's last tether to belonging had been cut. But here's where the story takes a twist. Insiders claim that Harry's tears weren't just about himself. They were about his children, Archie and Lilibet. What would this mean for them? If their father couldn't be called a prince, what about their titles? What about their future? Would they be dragged into the same storm, stripped of the royal sheen before they even had a chance to wear it? The thought haunted him, adding a sharper edge to every tear. Now, imagine the ghosts of the past rising in that moment. Diana's voice, echoing in his memory. She had once told friends she feared the institution would devour her sons, that it would crush them under its weight. And now, Harry must have wondered, was she right? Was he, at this very moment, living out the nightmare his mother foresaw? The tears, then, weren't just grief. They were vindication of his mother's fears. And let's not forget the symbolism. Harry had cried before, publicly even, at events for veterans, at charity galas. But those tears had always been framed as noble, emotional, heartfelt. These tears were different. These tears were private, raw, born of humiliation. A man in exile, crying not for show, but because his very sense of self was unraveling. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, cameras in London flashed, reporters breathlessly debated, commentators speculated. But none of them could capture the stillness of that California room where Harry wept. They could describe the fallout, but not the silence. The silence of a man realizing that everything he thought was untouchable wasn't. Now let me ask you, do you think Harry deserved this? Was it fair for Charles to make his son cry behind closed doors while the world cheered or mocked? Or was it necessary, a lesson that no one, not even a prince, is above the rules? These are the questions dividing millions right now. And yet, the most haunting detail is this. Those close to Harry say his tears were interrupted. Not by Meghan's fury, not by his children's voices, but by a phone call. A call from someone inside the royal circle. Someone who told him, bluntly, that this decision was final, that the title of prince was gone for good, and that he should prepare for more. That single call, insiders claim, pushed Harry over the edge. He wasn't just grieving the title anymore. He was grieving trust. Because if the palace could do this, what else could they take away? His military honors? His children's future titles? His place in the royal line altogether? The possibilities were endless and terrifying. And so Harry wept, not just for himself, but for the loss of a legacy, for the betrayal of blood, for the uncertainty of tomorrow. His tears were the soundless scream of a man realizing that no matter how far he ran, the monarchy's shadow would always follow him, and sometimes even crush him. But Harry wasn't the only one in tears that day. Another royal figure, far from California, also broke down when they heard the news. And their reaction would set into motion a chain of events that shocked even Buckingham Palace. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Meghan Markle was not prepared for this. Not like this. The morning air in Montecito was heavy, but the weight inside their home was unbearable. Harry sat, silent and shattered, his tears soaking into the reality of a world he no longer recognized. But Meghan? Meghan erupted. If Harry's pain was quiet heartbreak, hers was fire, rage, fury, disbelief that coursed through every word, every gesture. "What do they think they're doing?" she reportedly spat, pacing back and forth. Her voice, usually measured in public appearances, cracked with the sharpness of betrayal. She wasn't just angry at the palace. She was enraged at the audacity, the sheer nerve of Buckingham Palace to strip her husband, the son of Diana, the man who had given his entire youth to service, of the one thing that made him more than just a man, his princely title. And it wasn't just the title. Meghan saw it for what it was, a humiliation. A public stripping, calculated not to erase Harry privately, but to shame him before the world. To Meghan, this wasn't about tradition or dignity. It was about control, about silencing them, about reminding Harry, and by extension Meghan herself, that no matter how far they ran, the monarchy could reach them. She reportedly slammed her phone down on the table, then picked it up again, firing off messages, making calls. Friends in Hollywood, lawyers, even rumored connections in Washington. She wanted answers. She wanted leverage. She wanted revenge. Because Meghan Markle has always been a fighter. From her early days in Hollywood, clawing her way past rejection after rejection, to standing on the steps of St. George's Chapel and breaking centuries of royal tradition by walking herself partway down the aisle, Meghan has never been one to sit quietly when told no. And this was the biggest no of all. But here's the contradiction. While Meghan raged, Harry begged her to calm down. To stop. To think. His tears hadn't dried, and her anger was gasoline on a flame he was trying desperately to control. Can you picture it? Harry, the boy who had once followed orders on the battlefield, now pleading with his wife not to fight his own father. But Meghan wasn't having it. "Do you realize what this means?" she is said to have demanded. "If they can do this to you, what do you think they'll do to Archie? To Lilibet?" Her words cut sharper than any headline. For Meghan, this wasn't just about her husband. It was about her children. She knew titles meant more than tradition. They meant protection, status, recognition. Stripping Harry wasn't just a move against him. It was a warning shot aimed at the Sussex family as a whole. And Meghan's fury, in that moment, wasn't just reactive. It was strategic. She saw the bigger picture. The monarchy wasn't simply trying to punish Harry. It was trying to erase them. To reduce them to just another celebrity couple living in California, no different from any other Hollywood pair with a Netflix deal. And that was unacceptable to her. Let's not forget Meghan's history with the palace. From the moment she stepped into royal life, she was branded an outsider. The tabloids tore her apart. The courtiers whispered. The comparisons to Kate were brutal. And yet, Meghan held her ground, until the day she and Harry walked away. Now, years later, the palace's move to strip Harry's title felt to her like confirmation of what she had believed all along. They never wanted her there. And now, they didn't want Harry either. The irony is almost Shakespearean. Meghan left the palace because she claimed it suffocated her, because she felt unwelcome. And yet, even after building a life in America, even after signing multi-million-dollar deals, even after redefining herself as a global figure, here she was. Furious, heartbroken, fighting for the very thing she once claimed she didn't need, a royal title. Isn't that the contradiction? Meghan wanted freedom, but freedom without recognition feels like exile. Now imagine her fury turned outward. Meghan reportedly reached out to allies, people in their Hollywood circle, to warn them of the damage this could cause to their brand. No more Prince Harry and Meghan, Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Just Harry and Meghan. Ordinary names, stripped of the gravitas that sold books, secured deals, and attracted audiences. This wasn't just personal. It was financial. And Meghan knew it. She is said to have paced the room, her voice rising. They want to destroy us. They want us irrelevant. Those close to the couple claim her anger shifted quickly into strategy mode. She wanted to know what they could do legally. Could they fight it? Could they stop it? Could they appeal? Meghan doesn't take no for an answer easily, and this was no different. And here's where the story twists. Meghan, in her fury, allegedly reached out to one powerful ally, someone she believed could help turn the tide. A figure with influence, reach, and the ability to challenge the palace's narrative. Who was it? A Hollywood mogul? A political heavyweight? A media insider? The truth of that call remains shrouded, but insiders whisper it set off alarms not just in California, but in London. Because Meghan's fury wasn't just noise, it was action. She knew how to move fast, how to turn outrage into leverage. And if the palace thought they could silence the Sussexes with one statement, Meghan was determined to prove them wrong. But while Meghan raged against the palace from California, another storm was brewing across the Atlantic. In London, inside the very walls of Buckingham Palace, King Charles was quietly preparing to reveal the true reason behind his unprecedented decision. And when that reason came to light, it wouldn't just shock Meghan. It would shake the monarchy itself. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The grandeur of Buckingham Palace hides many secrets. But on that day, one truth finally broke through. King Charles had reached his limit. For months, perhaps even years, he had watched in silence as his youngest son aired grievances, gave interviews, published a memoir that scorched the family name, and forged an identity outside the firm. Charles, long known for patience and a desire to keep peace within his fractured family, had tried to hold back. But every man has a breaking point. And this was his. The announcement that stripped Harry of his princely title wasn't born overnight. It was the culmination of simmering frustration, mounting pressure, and a single moment that became the final straw. But what was that moment? What could possibly push a father, now the sovereign of the United Kingdom, to take such an unprecedented step against his own flesh and blood? Let's rewind. From the moment Harry and Meghan stepped back in 2020, the relationship between Charles and his son was marked by awkward silences and chilly exchanges. Charles sent messages through courtiers rather than speaking directly. Harry responded in interviews instead of private letters. It was a dance of distance, and every step widened the gap. Still, Charles resisted the drastic. He tolerated Harry's criticism of the monarchy as a gilded cage. He endured Meghan's insinuations about the royal family's coldness. Even when Spare was published, with its intimate accounts of family conflict, Charles gritted his teeth and carried on. But insiders whisper that one event, the proverbial last straw, shifted everything. A meeting, a private conversation, a comment made that, once repeated to Charles, left him both humiliated and enraged. Was it something Harry said in California that mocked the crown? Was it a revelation in a new interview that attacked Camilla, Charles's queen and lifelong partner? Or was it the unrelenting media circus that followed every Sussex move, dragging the monarchy into chaos time and again? Whatever it was, it cut too deep. For a man who had waited more than 70 years to ascend the throne, Charles could not allow his reign to be defined by his son's rebellion. Duty demanded action. The monarchy's survival depended on strength, not sentiment. And so, Charles chose the crown over the child. Now, imagine the quiet fury of that decision. Charles isn't impulsive. He is deliberate, reflective, often accused of being indecisive. But when he does decide, it is final. His advisors recall the tension in the room when he first raised the possibility of stripping Harry of his title. Some courtiers gasped. Others urged caution, warning it would look like revenge. But Charles, for once, was unmoved. The monarchy must protect its dignity, he reportedly said. Titles are earned, not inherited by default. That single line captured it all, an institution wounded by Harry's actions, and a king determined to defend it. But here's where the story takes an even sharper edge. Many believe Charles's decision wasn't made alone. He was pressured, whispered to, nudged by voices inside the palace who saw Harry not just as a wayward son, but as a threat to the institution itself. Advisors reminded him of history, how cracks in the monarchy had nearly toppled it before, how the abdication crisis of Edward VIII almost destroyed the crown, and how, if left unchecked, Harry's antics could one day do the same. Charles listened, and he acted. Yet the irony is stark, isn't it? Charles himself was once the rebellious prince, criticized for his love life, scorned for his marriage to Diana, condemned for his affair with Camilla. He knew what it was like to be hated by the public. He knew what it was like to feel misunderstood by the institution. And yet here he was, taking the very system that had nearly broken him and wielding it against his son. The cycle had come full circle. But maybe Charles believed he was doing what Diana could not. Diana had protected her boys fiercely, shielding them from the worst of royal life. Charles, however, believed he was protecting the monarchy itself, even if it meant sacrificing Harry. To him, the monarchy wasn't just a family. It was a 1,000-year-old institution, larger than any one man. And if that institution demanded that his son lose the title of prince, then Charles would bow to duty, not fatherhood. Here's a question for you. Do you think Charles made this choice as a king or as a father? Because the two roles are now inseparable. As king, he had to act. As a father, he could have forgiven. But forgiveness, in his eyes, would have been weakness. And weakness was a luxury he could no longer afford. Now let's not forget the role of Camilla. Queen Camilla, often painted as the woman who weathered decades of scandal to finally stand beside Charles as his consort, is rumored to have played a pivotal role in this decision. Some say she urged Charles to stand firm, to assert himself as king rather than be dragged by his son's drama. Others claim she stayed silent, knowing the optics of her involvement could make things worse. But her presence, her influence, cannot be ignored. Harry himself had once referred to her as the villain in his memoir. Perhaps Charles saw stripping the title as a way to defend his queen as much as his crown. So the statement was drafted, quietly, carefully, but with steel at its core. Prince Harry would no longer be acknowledged in any formal capacity. The words were Charles's dagger, slipped into the heart of the narrative, leaving no room for doubt. The monarchy had spoken, and the king had acted. But Charles's final straw wasn't just about protecting tradition. It was also about sending a message to William, to the public, and to history itself. The message was this: no one is above the institution, not even the king's own son. And here's the haunting part. Insiders claim that when Charles signed off on the statement, his hand trembled slightly. For all his resolve, for all his firmness, a shadow crossed his face. Was it guilt? Regret? A father's grief? No one knows. What we do know is this: Charles didn't just sever a title. He severed trust. But the king wasn't the only royal to weigh in on this monumental decision. Behind the scenes, another voice, equally powerful, equally determined, spoke up in support of Charles. A voice Harry never expected to oppose him so strongly. Because while Charles may have reached his breaking point, it was Prince William who made sure the axe fell. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming that it was never going to be Charles alone. A king does not rule in isolation. He is influenced, pushed, persuaded, sometimes even cornered by those closest to him. And in this case, no figure loomed larger than Prince William, the heir to the throne, the man who will one day be king himself. For years, William had carried the weight of the monarchy's future on his shoulders, all while his younger brother chipped away at its foundations. And now, finally, William stepped forward. The whispers began long before the palace's announcement. Courtiers spoke of William's quiet frustration. Friends recalled moments when his patience cracked in private, when he allegedly muttered that Harry had gone too far. But William's public face was one of restraint, stoic, composed, the perfect heir. Until now, insiders claim that it was William, more than anyone else, who pressed Charles to act. That without William's insistence, Harry might still be Prince Harry today. Why? Because for William, this wasn't just about family. It was about survival. The monarchy he will inherit one day depends on stability, respect, and an image of unity. Every headline about Harry and Meghan, every Netflix episode, every Oprah interview, every page of Spare eroded that image. And William knew that if the crown did not stand firm now, his reign could begin on a fractured foundation. Can you imagine the pressure? Knowing your brother's rebellion could poison your own destiny? Now, let's talk about the brothers. Once inseparable, bonded by tragedy after Diana's death, Harry and William were the faces of a new, modern monarchy. They joked together, served together, stood shoulder to shoulder. It's just us against the world, they used to say. But the world shifted. Meghan entered. Tensions grew. Words were said, private words that became public in Harry's memoir. And William, the loyal heir, found himself painted as cold, even violent. Remember that detail from Spare? Harry alleging that William physically attacked him during an argument about Meghan? That claim, more than almost anything else, is said to have enraged William. The future king accused of being a bully by his own brother. It was humiliation. And William doesn't forgive humiliation easily. So when the idea surfaced to strip Harry of his princely title, William reportedly did not hesitate. In meetings with Charles, in private conversations, William urged his father to take action. He argued that allowing Harry to keep the title while living in California, while criticizing the monarchy, was hypocrisy. You cannot be both prince and rebel, he is rumored to have said. And Charles listened, because William wasn't just speaking as a brother, he was speaking as the heir. But William's push wasn't just practical. It was personal. Behind his calm demeanor, William carries scars too. The media circus of his childhood. The pain of watching his parents' marriage collapse. The relentless spotlight on Kate. And then, the betrayal of his brother. For William, Harry's choices weren't just reckless. They were a rejection of everything they had endured together. Stripping Harry of his title wasn't just about protecting the monarchy. It was about drawing a line. It was William's way of saying, you cannot betray me, betray our family, and still wear the crown's name. Think about it. How often in history has an heir influenced a king? Countless times. Heirs are impatient, eager to shape the future. And William is no different. He sees himself not just as Charles's son, but as the guardian of the monarchy's tomorrow. To him, Harry's actions threatened not only Charles's reign but his own. And that was intolerable. But here's the chilling detail. Some insiders suggest that William's push went beyond advice. That he presented Charles with an ultimatum. Protect the monarchy, or risk losing the confidence of the heir. Imagine that conversation. A son pressuring his father, not as a child to a parent, but as a king-in-waiting to the sovereign. That's the kind of tension that can fracture dynasties. And yet, William wasn't alone. He had allies. Advisors, yes. Courtiers, certainly. But also family. His wife, Kate, has long been viewed as the steadying force of the monarchy, the perfect royal partner. While she reportedly stayed out of direct discussions, her influence over William cannot be underestimated. Kate, who has watched her every gesture dissected by the press, who has endured comparisons to Meghan, who has shouldered her own share of royal duty. Surely she too must have wondered why Harry and Meghan should enjoy the prestige of titles without the burdens. If William was the strategist, Kate was the quiet anchor behind him. But William's push had another supporter. His aunt, Princess Anne, known for her blunt honesty, and reportedly backed William's stance, telling Charles that Harry's actions had crossed the line. For William, having Anne in his corner was invaluable. It gave his arguments weight, a sense of tradition backing the modern heir. So the push grew stronger. What began as whispers became discussions. What began as frustration became strategy. And soon, Charles had no choice but to act. William had spoken. The heir had made his will clear. And the monarchy could not afford to appear divided. Here's the contradiction, though. William, in pushing for Harry to lose his title, may have secured the monarchy in the short term. But at what cost to brotherhood? To family? Can a bond once so unbreakable ever recover from such a betrayal? Because make no mistake, Harry will see William's hand in this. And that knowledge, more than the statement itself, may be what cuts deepest. Now pause for a moment. Imagine Harry, sitting in California, realizing that the man he once called his best friend, his protector, his brother, had stood behind the decision to strip him of his title. Can you feel the devastation? The heartbreak that no father's statement could cause, but a brother's betrayal could? That's the wound that may never heal. And yet, William wasn't acting alone. Another royal, equally formidable, equally unyielding, stepped forward to support the move. Someone Harry always respected, someone known for speaking truth without fear. Princess Anne. And when Anne's voice entered the debate, the tide was sealed. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Princess Anne has always been the one royal who doesn't sugarcoat a thing. No frills, no fuss, no hesitation. She is the embodiment of that old-fashioned, stiff upper lip resilience, the royal who shows up to hundreds of engagements every year without complaint, without scandal, without headlines. And when she speaks, she doesn't lace her words with diplomacy or flattery. She delivers them bluntly, like an arrow hitting its mark. And in the storm swirling around Harry, it was Anne's voice that cut through the noise with a truth no one else dared to say out loud. Insiders whisper that Anne's intervention was pivotal, in a family where emotions are often suppressed, and has made a reputation for telling it like it is. When Charles wavered, when William pressed, when courtiers debated, it was Anne who reportedly laid the matter bare. Harry had crossed a line, and there was no going back. "You can't have it both ways," she is said to have told her brother, the king. He walked away. He chose. And choices have consequences. Think about that for a moment. In a family drowning in tradition, there are few who can cut through with such clarity. And who never wanted the limelight, who raised her children without royal titles, who turned her back on pomp in favor of duty, looked at Harry's situation with unsentimental eyes. To her, the idea of Harry clinging to Prince while rejecting the monarchy's responsibilities was not just hypocritical. It was insulting to the rest of them who continued to carry the load. And isn't there a sting in that? And the one royal who might have been most sympathetic to Harry's desire for independence turned out to be one of his fiercest critics. She had lived her own life outside the circus of titles, yet she saw Harry's rebellion not as courage but as betrayal. That irony is devastating. Now imagine the meeting. Charles, weary, conflicted. William, determined, insistent. Advisors circling, divided on strategy. And then Anne, direct, unsparing, breaking through the hesitation. "The monarchy isn't a costume you put on when it suits you," she may have said. "It's not a part-time job. You're either in or you're out." Those words, or something like them, reportedly struck Charles to the core. Because Anne wasn't just talking about Harry. She was talking about survival. The monarchy's survival. Anne's hard truth was this. Harry's behavior had exposed the monarchy to ridicule. Every Netflix scene, every interview soundbite, every revelation in Spare dragged the crown into the mud. And if the monarchy allowed Harry to keep calling himself Prince while doing it, then the institution itself was complicit. It was Anne who framed it not as a personal issue, not as a father-son spat, but as an institutional crisis. And in doing so, she tipped the scales. But let's pause here. Do you see the contradiction? Anne herself had insisted her own children, Peter and Zara, would grow up without titles. She knew firsthand the value of freedom from the royal machine. And yet, when Harry pursued something similar, she condemned it. Why? Perhaps because Zara and Peter never cashed in on their royal connections. They lived privately, without drama, without undermining the monarchy from the sidelines. To Anne, that was the honorable way to leave. Harry's way, profiting off royal secrets while still clinging to royal status, was dishonorable. And in her blunt style, she made that distinction clear. Reports suggest Charles listened intently. He trusted Anne, always had. Of all his siblings, and was the one whose judgment he respected most. She had never sought to overshadow him, never embarrassed the crown with scandal. If, instead, Harry had to lose the title, Charles knew it was more than personal, it was necessary. And William? He welcomed Anne's support like a soldier welcoming reinforcements. The heir and the hardest-working royal, standing together, created an alliance Charles could not ignore. Suddenly, the debate wasn't just Charles against his conscience. It was Charles being told by his heir and his sister, the monarchy's future and its backbone, that decisive action had to be taken. But let's not forget the human side. For Harry, discovering Anne's role in this decision would have been crushing. This wasn't just his father or his brother. This was his aunt, the woman who had always seemed immune to the drama of royal life, the relative who embodied plain-speaking honesty. If even Anne had turned against him, what hope was there of reconciliation? To Harry, it wasn't just betrayal. It was abandonment by the one family member who had always seemed above politics. And yet, Anne wasn't finished. Her intervention reportedly reminded Charles of something crucial: precedent. A precedent buried in royal history, forgotten by most, but revived in that meeting. A precedent that showed stripping a title wasn't just possible, it had been done before. And once that precedent was raised, the decision was no longer unprecedented. It was historical continuity. Do you see how powerful that was? And, with one reminder, reframe the move not as cruelty, but as tradition. Not as a vendetta, but as duty. And that sealed it. Charles, who always clung to tradition for legitimacy, had the justification he needed. But what was that precedent? Who in royal history had faced such erasure before? And how could the echoes of the past shape Harry's future? Because when the palace dug into the archives and uncovered that forgotten precedent, the story shifted from a family feud to a matter of royal history repeating itself. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. History has a way of resurfacing when you least expect it. For most people, the monarchy seems eternal, unchanging, a chain of crowns passed from one head to the next. But behind the polished facade of palaces and pomp lies a darker truth. The institution has never hesitated to sacrifice its own when survival was at stake. And in the storm over Harry's title, Buckingham Palace unearthed a precedent long buried, a reminder that Harry was not the first royal to be stripped of his status. The story begins with Edward VIII, the king who fell for love and abandoned his throne. In 1936, when Edward chose Wallis Simpson over the crown, he didn't just abdicate. He was punished. Parliament decreed he would no longer be king, but more than that, he was denied the title His Royal Highness for his wife. Wallis would never be HRH, despite being married to a king. It was a symbolic slap, a way to ensure Edward's choice would carry consequences. Doesn't that echo now? A royal choosing love and independence over duty, only to find the institution waiting with a penalty? But Edward's case wasn't the only one. There's Prince Andrew, Charles's own brother. Though not stripped of the title prince, Andrew was stripped of military honors, royal patronages, and his public role after his scandal erupted. He still holds the title technically, but in practice, he is no longer treated as HRH. His fall from grace proved that even birthright isn't indestructible. And Harry, watching his uncle's public humiliation, must have wondered, was this a preview of his own fate? Then there are the quieter cases, forgotten by most, but deadly relevant now. Princess Patricia of Connaught, a granddaughter of Queen Victoria, chose to marry a commoner in 1919. By her own choice, or perhaps under pressure, she relinquished her royal title, becoming Lady Patricia Ramsay. She lived a quieter life, but the precedent was set. Titles can be lost when choices collide with tradition. And if we dig deeper, there's even the chilling case of German royals connected to the British crown during World War I. King George V, fearing anti-German sentiment, stripped numerous relatives of their British titles in 1917. In one sweeping stroke, names that had carried royal weight for generations were erased. That move was about optics, about protecting the monarchy's reputation in a time of crisis. Does that sound familiar? So when Buckingham Palace looked at Harry, they didn't see a unique case. They saw echoes of Edward, of Andrew, of Patricia, of German cousins erased by decree. They saw a long line of royals who had discovered that titles are not invincible shields. They are privileges, and privileges can be revoked. But here's the cruel twist. Every one of those precedents was about distancing the monarchy from scandal, controversy, or danger. And in citing them, the palace was declaring Harry himself to be a danger. Not a wayward son, not a grieving boy shaped by trauma, but a threat to the very survival of the monarchy. Isn't that devastating? That in the eyes of his own family, Harry's rebellion had placed him in the same category as abdication crises, wartime enemies, and public disgraces. Now let's pause here. Do you see the contradiction? The monarchy prides itself on being a family, yet when challenged, it treats family as expendable. Edward VIII was a brother and a son, but he was cast aside. Andrew, Charles's own brother, was pushed into exile. And now Harry, the son of the king, finds himself standing in that same line of outcasts. What does that tell you? That in the monarchy, blood is never thicker than duty. But the precedent revealed something else, something even darker. In every historical case, once a title was lost, it was never returned. There were no second chances, no path to restoration. Once gone, it was gone forever. And for Harry, that realization must have been shattering. His tears weren't just about today's humiliation. They were about the permanence of tomorrow. Because if history holds true, there is no going back. And yet, this precedent was incomplete. Because while Edward lost his throne, while Patricia gave up her title, while Andrew was disgraced, none of them had ever been in Harry's exact position. None had been the child of a reigning monarch, stripped by his own father. That's what makes this unprecedented. That's what sets Harry's case apart. The precedent gave Charles justification, yes, but it also underscored how shocking his decision truly was. Think of the optics. A king who waited 70 years for the throne now becomes the first monarch in modern history to strip his own son of his princely identity. Historians will debate it for decades. Was Charles brave, defending tradition? Or was he ruthless, sacrificing his son for the crown? Either way, the precedent provided cover, but the act itself still carved a scar in royal history unlike any other. And yet, the palace wasn't worried about optics alone. They were worried about backlash. Because precedents may justify decisions, but the public decides whether they accept them. And as the announcement spread, it wasn't just historians or insiders weighing in. It was ordinary people, social media warriors, celebrities, politicians. And their reactions turned the entire affair into something bigger than Charles, bigger than Harry, bigger than the monarchy itself. Because when the public saw Harry stripped of his title, they didn't just see a prince losing a word. They saw a family tearing itself apart. They saw betrayal. They saw drama. And they took sides. And that public explosion, the backlash, the frenzy, the divided loyalties, was the next storm waiting to erupt. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The statement had barely been out for an hour before the world went into meltdown. Phones lit up. Screens flashed red banners. News anchors, wide-eyed, interrupted broadcasts mid-sentence. And suddenly, a quiet morning in London turned into a global storm. The palace had spoken, and the world was ready to answer. Social media was first. Twitter exploded with hashtags like #PrinceNoMore, #JusticeForHarry, #ProtectTheCrown. Within minutes, Harry's name was trending in 20 countries. Memes flooded Instagram, half mocking him, half defending him. TikTok videos dissected the palace's statement word by word, some racking up millions of views in hours. The internet had chosen its battlefield, and the sides were clear. Those who believed Charles had done the right thing to protect the monarchy, and those who believed he had gone too far, stripping a grieving son of the last piece of his identity. The tabloids followed. The Daily Mail screamed across its front page, "King cuts son adrift." The Sun, never subtle, plastered Harry's face with the headline, "Prince and no more." Meanwhile, broadsheets like The Times and The Guardian adopted more somber tones, questioning the long-term consequences for the monarchy. And in America, the narrative was almost the opposite. Morning talk shows opened with emotional pleas for Harry, casting him as a victim of an archaic institution. "Imagine your own father doing this to you," one host declared, her voice breaking. "Can you feel the divide? Britain framing it as justice, America framing it as cruelty. Two nations watching the same drama, interpreting it through their own lens of loyalty and rebellion. And caught in the middle? Harry." But it didn't stop with headlines. Politicians chimed in. Some British MPs praised the king for defending tradition. Others muttered that it was a dangerous distraction at a time of economic turmoil. Across the Atlantic, celebrities lined up to pick sides. Some tweeted in Harry's defense, pointing out his military service, his charity work, his devotion to Diana's legacy. Others criticized him for playing the victim while living in luxury in California. The noise was deafening. And then came the ordinary people, the voices of the public. Crowds outside Buckingham Palace were interviewed live, their opinions raw and emotional. "He doesn't deserve to be a prince if he won't be royal," one man said, waving a Union Jack. A woman shook her head, holding back tears. Diana would be devastated. Her boy humiliated like this. Every opinion was laced with pain, anger, or triumph. The monarchy had touched a nerve that cut deep into the British psyche. Now here's the irony. The palace wanted dignity. They wanted control. But the moment they stripped Harry of his title, they unleashed chaos they could never reel back in. Because you can control a press release, but you cannot control millions of voices across the world. The backlash was out of their hands. And the frenzy only grew when Harry and Meghan's silence stretched into hours. Every minute without a statement became a story in itself. Are they hiding? asked one broadcaster. Are they strategizing? Speculated another. The silence became deafening. The media hounded Montecito, cameras camped outside their gates, helicopters buzzing overhead. The Sussexes were prisoners in their own mansion. But here's where it gets even more gripping. Leaks began to pour out. Anonymous sources close to the couple told outlets that Harry was heartbroken and Meghan was furious. Other whispers claimed Meghan had already called her lawyers. Still others said the couple was preparing a counter-statement that would shake Buckingham Palace to its core. Every leak stoked the fire. Every rumor became fuel. And then came the contradictions. While some outlets painted Harry as broken and betrayed, others pushed a different narrative, that he was relieved. That perhaps, without the title, he could finally live free, no longer tethered to the monarchy he had fled. These contradictions pulled the public into a frenzy. Which version was true? Was Harry weeping in Montecito, or was he smiling at newfound freedom? The mystery itself became irresistible. Now ask yourself this. What side would you take? Would you side with Charles, the king defending an institution older than most nations? Or with Harry, the son cast adrift by his own blood? These were the questions dividing dinner tables, office chatter, and online debates across the globe. And every side believed it was right. But here's the twist. While the world was arguing, Hollywood was watching. Executives in boardrooms, agents with contracts, brand managers with deals on the table, all asking the same question. What happens to Harry and Meghan's value now? Are they still the Duke and Duchess of Sussex? Are they still royals? Or are they just another celebrity couple trying to sell their story? The answers would shape their future in ways even they hadn't imagined. And in California, far from the frenzy of London tabloids, Harry and Meghan weren't just dealing with public backlash. They were facing a private crisis that threatened their entire empire. Because when the dust settled, the real question wasn't just what the world thought of Harry losing his title. It was whether Hollywood still cared. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. In California, the sun was shining. But inside the walls of Montecito, a storm was brewing that no weather forecast could predict. The palace's statement hadn't just humiliated Harry. It had detonated a bomb under the Sussexes' carefully constructed empire. Because make no mistake, Harry and Meghan were more than a couple. They were a brand. A brand built on royal status, celebrity sparkle, and a narrative of independence wrapped in royal mystique. And now, that foundation had cracked. Hollywood is not sentimental. It doesn't care about tradition, dignity, or centuries of monarchy. It cares about marketability, about names that sell tickets, attract subscribers, bring in viewers. And Prince Harry was marketable. It was exotic, unique, instantly recognizable. Take away Prince, and suddenly the magic falters. Suddenly, Harry isn't a royal figurehead. He's just another man with a story to tell. And Hollywood doesn't pay millions for just another man. Behind the scenes, phones rang in studios and corporate boardrooms. Netflix executives, already rumored to be disappointed with the couple's earlier projects, began asking tough questions. Would audiences still tune in to Harry and Meghan without the royal sheen? Spotify, which had already parted ways with Meghan after her podcast struggled, looked vindicated. Publishers whispered that future book deals might lose their luster. Even public speaking bureaus, those who booked the Sussexes for jaw-dropping fees, began to wonder, will audiences still pay six figures to hear from Harry if he's no longer a prince? Imagine the pressure. For years, Meghan had carefully positioned herself as half of a power couple, the duchess who defied the palace, the wife of a prince who chose love over duty. Without the title, the story changes. Without the title, critics could dismiss them as celebrities trading on scandal. Without the title, their empire risked collapse. And Meghan knew it. Reports claim she was livid, not just at the insult, but at the impact. She had built connections with Oprah, with Hollywood moguls, with politicians. All of it leveraged from the unique combination of being both royal and rebellious. Strip away royal, and what's left? Rebellion without power. And rebellion without power doesn't sell. Harry, meanwhile, was caught in the middle. For him, the loss was emotional, personal. For Meghan, it was strategic, financial. Can you see the clash? Harry crying over betrayal, Meghan calculating the fallout. Two different perspectives on the same catastrophe. And yet, both knew the same truth. Their brand was in jeopardy. But here's where the tension deepens. In the wake of the palace's announcement, Hollywood itself began to split. Some allies doubled down. This makes them victims, one insider allegedly told Variety. Audiences love an underdog story. They'll be bigger than ever. Others disagreed. Without the title, they're just another celebrity couple, one executive said bluntly. There's no hook anymore. And so the Sussexes found themselves in a new war, not against the palace, but against perception. A war over relevance. A war over whether their voices still mattered. And Hollywood, fickle and fast-moving, wasn't going to wait around for them to figure it out. Now let's add another layer. The Sussexes had planned future ventures, documentaries, books, appearances. All of them depended on their royal connection. Even the charities they supported often highlighted Harry's, Prince, status to draw attention. Without it, doors might begin to close. Invitations,